So yeah, let's move to our last selection. Marissa P. Clark, Awaiting the Orionids. So what? Oh, I saved. This was for you, Chris. I saved the love poem for last. So maybe after we get to our initial consideration, you can go to town on this one. So, Evan, this one was your selection. What did you think about it to start?
Yeah, oh, I'm feeling lucky and spoiled. Ash, I was split between your poem and Marissa, and now to realize we get to talk about both. Ooh, goody. Um, I wonder, is it okay if I read it to start?
Sure, go for it.
Yeah. Awaiting the Orionids. Awaiting the Orionids, I prepare my wish to fall in love again, to fly, and in descent, not to dive and crash, but level off, and then glide and rise and dip, a constant motion, like breath, dependable, something to call relationship. I stood outside, shivering, and searched the sky, free of moon and full of stars. Hours I watched for promised rain, of meteors to streak hope against the black. When faint gray rimmed the mountain range, and encroaching daylight wiped away the stars like specks of salt spilled on a tablecloth, I went inside and prayed to rest, and the stirring world love moved among got on with life. I'm really grateful for this poem. One of the things that enchanted me about it right away was it sort of starts with this kind of audacity of hope. Like, I'm going to hope for things that break physics. I'm going to hope for stars that don't actually fall, and do something else. And there's this like sound echo that we get, the glide and rise and dip, that the repetition of the eyes, that sound to me like pulls it up. Like, I feel like I'm sort of getting into this, like, I don't know, more homeostatic or like biological rhythm, not the falling of a star. And then we're forced to, like, oh my God, she prepared her wish and prepared it for the Orionids, which, you know, only come when Halley's Comet comes around. Like, that is a rare event, and didn't see any. And so I could imagine this reader, you know, maybe wrestling with, oh crap, sort of wasted a wish on that. But then has this sort of re-entry back into her, or their, I don't actually know their pronouns, their daily life, that sort of, it lands in this interesting way. Not, I prayed, you know, for rest, like, oh my God, I was heartbroken. I prayed to rest. Like, praying starts to become a tool of rest. And then the stirring world love moved among got on with life. I almost feel like, you know, the poem doesn't dive and crash. It levels off at the end, which is very interesting because the story seems to be that, oh, the speaker didn't get what they want, but did they? So yeah, sorry, that was a lot of thoughts, but those are some of the things that I love about the poem.
I think for me that idea of the speaker didn't get what they want, but did they, was like really what made this poem sing for me. And at that hinge point in the middle where if you just read through, you kind of make the leap that they didn't see any stars, but it never really says that explicitly, which I thought was a really brilliant move. There's like still this little gap of hope in there that is not one way or the other, you know? And so like there's something about that seemed really smart, because I think like our intuitive sense of, as writers, is like, say what happened, right? Like whether it did or didn't happen. And instead there's just this like kind of possibility, and the poem moves on. And there's that spaciousness I thought was my favorite part of this poem.
Yeah, I like the word spaciousness for this one as well. There's something kind of, there's a simplicity in the lines, I think, that is a little bit still unusual, but still simple. I guess, do you know what I mean? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I think that it, like some of the line breaks follow patterns that I have seen in other poems, but it's new content. So I find it satisfying, this sort of free of moon and full of stars. I've seen many lines with moon and stars in them before, but not this one, and so I had this sort of joy of a person who is bringing craft that's been applied in many ways to this little moment.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah.
I think that the simplicity really comes through with like the word choices, and like the images all feel really clear, but then there are like these small choices either in line break or punctuation, or just ordering a series of words slightly different than we might kind of expect them to naturally come, that really makes me pause and sit with them and like kind of deliberate out additional options for their meaning, and like in a way that makes it more complex for me.
Yeah, and I kind of go back to the last couple of lines, or even, I mean, the last sentence, right? If you read it as a sentence, it's quite interesting, but maybe if you read it on the line level, it's like, okay, it's not, not too unusual. But yeah, if you read that as a prose sentence, it's pretty fantastic. And of course, it's fantastic in the poem as well, but it's just kind of like embedded in just a different way. It doesn't seem quite as interesting at first. So it kind of, I love those poems, and we've covered a few of them that kind of seem kind of deceptively, easy to overlook maybe. I think that this one maybe fits into that category, because like you said, okay, it's a love poem, it's another love poem. How many of those can there be? Oh, with the stars, yeah, okay. But yeah, when you kind of break past a little bit of that kind of commonality, yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on.
Oh yeah, Aaron, that it's so funny because yes, of course, like a love poem with shooting stars in it. It's like, oh man, how is this possibly going to work? And then I'm glad you mentioned that last sentence, because I do see like it reads as a sentence to me. And one really important part, I think, in that sentence is this encroaching daylight wiped away the stars like specks of salt spilled on a tablecloth. That image does so many things, does so much work for me. For example, it's suddenly the poem starts to arrive back at home. Like I get the sense that the person is arriving, and that maybe they're just trying to process the seeing or the not seeing, and the do stars fall or not. And now suddenly the stars have become this sort of insignificant but also sort of annoying thing, like salt in the tablecloth. It's like you can't quite get the grains out, and your eye catches it, and then you start wondering about the importance of it. The way that image and the sort of frustration of like, oh, can I wipe that? Like you can't quite wipe the tablecloth. I don't know, that the texture of that does so much to start like slowing me down, of like, oh, I'm coming back into the mortal life. And that sets up this amazing last line of the stirring world love moved among got on with life. And, here we had this speaker who was so lovesick or love wandering or felt distant from love. And it's not clear that it resolved in some way, but this person is starting to develop this awareness as they arrive back at home that in the life around them, there is love. And, when they said something to call relationship, you can call a lot of things relationship. Suddenly, like the possibilities of what relationship means in this sort of like vague, everythingy kind of statement, the stirring world, love moved among, got on with life. Just like, that's set up so nicely for me by the tablecloth.
Yeah, I didn't quite read into the tablecloth image. It's one of those simple ones that kind of just slips through your radar. But yeah, it is kind of quite a nice image, quite a fitting image to the end of the poem. So I do have some thoughts from Marisa, if you're up for hearing them.
Oh, I saw Ash on mute though.
Oh, what?
You're good. You're good. I was just gonna say that like I really liked that what you were talking about as a representation of how like functionally how the poem levels off. There's like this mechanism of sight where the mountains are like huge and we're out here, and then like we're just like brought in quite literally to this like very small internal right in front of us space. And it's just like it's a really brilliant writing move to do that. And I think like leveled off is a great word. It comes earlier in the poem, and that's a great word for explaining what's happening there.
Perfect. Yeah, there's a subtlety to it, which is so great, because once you see it, you're like, how did I not see it the first 5 times I read it? Yeah, perfect. So for Marisa, she said this poem is a heavily exaggerated true story. Every year in October, the Orionid meteor shower occurs, and a couple of years ago, they were expected to be quite spectacular in New Mexico, where I live. I stayed up extra late to watch the display. I also carefully planned the wish I would make on the first shooting star I saw. I construct wishes carefully, always with qualifying clauses and contingencies. As the poem makes clear, I decided I was ready to take a chance on love again. Now, within 15 minutes, the cold drove me back inside. I tried again later, same result. I stayed out just long enough to get grumpy about losing sleep and not seeing a single shooting star. Back inside and warm again, I chastised myself. There are far more effective ways to find love than waiting outside to wish on a star. In terms of structure, she goes on to say, I aimed for lines that conveyed the quality of the breathing described in the poem, even as the short line length and overall brevity make the poem hasten in its descent down the page. So I love when there's that, I could say seed of truth, but if you could say the grain of salt at the heart of the poem, or whatever, to use the metaphor in the poem, we can say, I love when there is that kind of that little true story, and that's why I like, if I can, when an author can share their thoughts, because a lot of times there is that reference, an experience, an image, even starting with that class I was in, and the poet I admired, and kind of wanting to do something similar. There's always like something that kind of sparks our inspiration and our imagination, stuff like that. So I love hearing those things, and that was another case where the authors, both of them, Marisa and Lindsay, and Ash, of course, you came through in a literal sense for joining us, but the others came through in their emails to me.